Hello and welcome back to another episode of Math with Miss Murthy. Today's lesson is lesson 4.3, comparing and ordering integers. So in today's lesson, we will compare and order integers using our number line. As usual, pause and do the warm up and the check problems on your own, please. Alright, so to compare integers, we can compare the signs, which is the positive or the negative sign that we use, as well as the magnitude or the size of the numbers. So if the signs are different, where you have one positive integer and one negative integer, the positive integer will always be greater than the negative integer. Okay, so a positive integer will always be greater than the negative integer. So let's compare 2 and negative 3. In this case, the signs are different. So let us compare the signs. A positive integer we know is greater than the negative integer. So 2 is greater than negative 3. This is just because the positive integer is to the right of the number line. It's a quantity greater than 0. Whereas a negative integer is to the left of the number line. It's a quantity less than 0. Alright. So if the signs of two integers are the same, we now will use a number line to compare them. On the horizontal number line, we know positive integers are graphed to the right of 0 and negative to the left of 0. So greater numbers will be farther to the right. Whereas on a vertical number line, positive integers are graphed above 0 and negative integers are graphed below 0. And again, greater numbers are graphed farther above 0. So if we were to compare these two numbers, negative 2 and negative 3, we see that the signs are the same. Both of these are negative. So we're going to use a number line. So the first step we'll do is graph these numbers. Graph negative 2 over here. And then we have negative 3, which is over here. And you can see negative 2 is farther to the right than negative 3. Negative 2 is to the right of negative 3. Therefore, negative 2 is greater than negative 3. Alright, let's take a look at example 1. Justin has a score of negative 5 on the Trueville trivia game. Desiree's score is negative 3. So write an inequality. Pay attention. Write an inequality to compare the scores and then explain the meaning of the inequality. So let's first write an inequality. To do that, we're going to graph our integers on the number line. So we have a number line which ranges from negative 5 to positive 5. And we know that Justin's score is negative 5 and Desiree's score is negative 3. So we graph those 2 points. And when we compare, we can see that negative 3 is greater than negative 5. So that's going to be our inequality. And what is the meaning of the inequality in this case? We know that negative 3 is Desiree's score. So what we can say is since negative 3 is greater than negative 5, Desiree has a higher score in the trivia game. Alright, pause and do the check problem on your own. Okay, so to order sets of integers, we're going to use a number line to order our set of integers from the least to the greatest or from the greatest to the least, as the case may be. Okay, so let's order the set of graph. Let's graph first and then order the set of integers negative 8, 3, negative 1, 0, and 6. So I'm going to draw my number line, mark these units and label them from negative 8 to positive 8. I graph my first number negative 8 over here. My second number 3 goes over here. Let me mark these up now. Negative 8, negative 3, positive 3, negative 1, 0, and positive 6. So if we are looking at the numbers from left to right, the leftmost is the least, the rightmost is the greatest. You can see from least to greatest, the order is negative 8, negative 1, 0, 3, and 6. And if you want to order it from greatest to smallest, we're going to go from right to left, which is 6, 3, 0, negative 1, negative 8. Alright, let's take a look at example 2. This table shows the lowest accessible elevations for several continents. So we have Antarctica, which has the lowest elevation at negative 50 meters, Australia negative 15 meters, North America negative 86 meters, and South America negative 105. So we're going to order our continents from the least to the greatest according to their lowest elevation. First step, we're going to graph all our numbers on the number line. So you can say we have negative 105, negative 86, negative 50, and negative 15. So as we graph these, let's see, negative 105, negative 86, negative 50, negative 15. And my table here shows negative 105 is South America. So this would be South America. Then we have negative 86, which is North America. Negative 50 is Antarctica. And negative 15 is Australia. So which continent has the least accessible elevation? That's going to be South America. And then the greatest accessible elevation is Australia. And if we write it in order from the least to the greatest, you can see we have South America, North America, Antarctica, and Australia. All right, pause and do the check problem on your own, please. What you need to do is arrange the months from the fewest to the most number of minutes remaining at the end of the month. All right, so we know how to order the numbers when you see them on a horizontal number line. The values increase as they move to the right and decrease as they move to the left. But what happens to the absolute value or the magnitude of the numbers as the value increases or decreases? We know that the absolute value is the distance that a number is from the number 0. So if I have my number line 0, 1, 2, let's say this is negative 1, this is negative 2. The distance of negative 2 from 0 is 2. The distance of 2 from 0 is also 2. So absolute value is a distance that a number is from 0, and it increases the farther the number is from 0. So for example, if I had a number 3 over here, the distance of that number from 0 would be 3. So if I had a 3, 3 would be greater than the absolute value of 3 would be greater than the absolute value of 2. So as a positive value increases or moves farther from 0, its absolute value also increases. As the negative value decreases, because remember, negative values are decreasing or moving farther away from 0, but because it moves farther away from 0, its absolute value increases. Okay, let's take a look at this example. Suppose Kato and Ember are scuba diving. Kato drove to 25 feet below sea level, and that can be represented by my integer negative 25. Ember dove to 30 feet below sea level, which can be represented by the integer negative 30. Who reached a greater depth? We know that negative 25 is greater than negative 30. So you might be tempted to say Kato did. But when determining who reached a greater depth, we are going to consider the magnitude of the numbers, not just the placement on the number line. Therefore, in this case, it's going to be Ember who dove to negative 30. So the absolute value of negative 30 is 30. Absolute value of negative 25 is 25. Which absolute value is greater? That is 30. So since these absolute values are greater, we know that Ember's depth is greater. All right, let's take a look at the example 3. Explain why an account balance less than negative 40 represents a debt greater than 40. So we know that debt is the money that is owed by one person to another person. An example of an account balance less than negative 40 would be, for example, negative 50. So we write an inequality comparing the two amounts. We know that negative 50 is less than negative 40. And then we are going to use absolute value to determine which integer represents a greater debt. So if we look at the absolute value, which is denoted by these two vertical parallel lines around the number. Okay. So We know that the absolute value of negative 50 is 50, which is greater than the absolute value of negative 40, which would be 40. So an account balance less than $50 has a lesser value but a greater absolute value. Okay, so an account balance of negative 50 means a debt of 50, which in this case we see is greater than debt of 40. All right, pause and do the check problem on your own. And we will discuss the supply problem in class together, okay? That's all I have for you today. Ciao.